Hey, this is the Drunk Carpenter, and today we built a table out of not so great wood. Holy crap, I built that thing? Well, I guess let's get started. So being the Drunk Carpenter I am, I have absolutely no plans for this thing.
Me plan now!
Well, luckily for me, I went searching around and I found some good pieces of wood that I think I can use for this project. So I'm just gonna go ahead and grab these and then just mill them up right away, just because all these pieces are all rough cut and they need to be milled down so that they're all square. So I know this coffee table, I want it to be about 40 inches by 40 inches on top and 20 inches tall. All right, so we got everything milled up now. Whew. And as you can see, we got all of our wood for our top piece here, our legs, base, and side pieces too. And first thing I want to work on out of all this stuff is just gluing up that top piece. I'm just using wood glue. This stuff is just under 3/4 inch. If you are building a table like this similar to mine, I would recommend using a little bit thicker pieces, probably closer to about 1 inch. But since this is just a thinner tabletop, I'm not doing anything fancy, no dowels, no dominoes. We're just using some wood glue to glue all this stuff up. And go ahead, laugh at me. You can see that my workspace definitely isn't big enough for a tabletop like this. But I'm gonna go ahead and grab some bracing and brace this up, trying to make sure that this is gonna be as flat as I can get it. Whew, that don't deserve a beer.
Beer!
I'm not sure what does. So as you can see, this is definitely not the most professional setup. You can see all my clamps are different colors. Tabletops like this should be made in a tabletop jig like this. But hey, for the average guy like me and you, something like this, although a little bit rickety, it's gonna work just fine, don't worry. And now that we got no more room in the shop because of that tabletop over here, we're gonna have a little beer break and wait for that to dry. Just kidding, we got things to do. All right, so while we're waiting, we're gonna go ahead and chop up these legs. Now remember when we cut out these legs, we added an extra inch or two just for a little extra play. But because we got that extra length, we don't have to be super precise with our 45-degree cut that we're doing here. It's always easiest to cut that 45 and measure off from that to get your final cut. Am I making sense?
Know what I'm saying?
What I'm trying to say is doing that 45-degree cut can be pretty difficult to be super precise on it. So just make that be your first cut and then you don't gotta worry about it. And then our final cut will just be a straight cut here, measured from this 45-degree. A lot easier to do it. And trust me, the less measuring you gotta do, the better. So to finish off these legs and get them to the correct height, all I did is put a little stopper piece of wood on one side of my chop saw. That way I'll know where to set my leg and I'll get the same cut just universally on these pieces. So we're onto our base here. And you can see I did cut a 45-degree on it. So this bottom piece is gonna have a 45 on each side. Meanwhile, our legs are only gonna have it on the bottom side. So the unfortunate part about that is everything I just said like 30 seconds ago, we're actually gonna have to do it with this. That sucks.
But you gotta be kidding me!
And there probably is a professional way of doing this, but all I do is just kind of line my tape measure up at the end right here. Now, I might not be a professional, but that's 40 degrees. Ugh, inches, Jesus. That's 40, whatever. So now that we got our legs finished, we're gonna go ahead and cut some datums into them. Datums? I don't know, whatever these things are. So we're just gonna cut one on the top face of it. What we're gonna cut out is our thickness of our trim piece plus the width of it, but the width is minus the tabletop. So we're not gonna be doing this full width. But probably the easiest way to mark it out is just put it on and draw your line. Then we're just gonna run over to the table saw. There is datum sets that make this go a heck of a lot faster. Yeah, I don't have one, so now it's just a time issue of cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting. But it does the same thing. And while we got the table saw datum thing going, we're gonna go ahead and do it on this base as well. We'll be making a whatever this kind of a joint is. And pretty much all we're doing is making these fit together like Lincoln logs. We're gonna go ahead and cut the top half of this one out and the bottom half of this, and they'll sink in together like a Lincoln log. So we got all of our cuts done, but as you can see, because we didn't have the appropriate tools, and we just ended up using a table saw blade, our joints look absolutely horrible. So all I'm gonna do is just grab a file and kind of smooth it out. And as you can see, filing down just makes it a lot smoother and a lot better to work with. But now that we got these legs all prepped and ready to go, we can go ahead and stick them together. So we gotta go ahead and put our legs together a little something like this. But we're just not gonna glue them on. So what we're gonna do is throw a couple dowels in here. I'm just gonna do 2. You could probably get away with not putting any dowels in here and just doing the wood glue. But putting dowels in here will help you so much with the alignment and just keeping it in place while that glue dries. It's going to be darn near impossible to clamp this up and make sure that it's all aligned without those dowels to just line you up already. So I don't need to go crazy with it. I'm just gonna put 2 dowels in here. That's gonna make sure that my pieces are all lined up and I don't have to be too worried when I'm clamping this together because I know it's just gonna pull together and it's gonna line up damn near perfectly because I got those dowels in there. So now we're gonna go back to the tabletop. Now that it's all put together, I'm gonna do my best just to flatten this out. I'm using just a hand plane to get the bigger parts down, and then a belt sander just to get it as flat as possible. I think it's time for a new belt.
No shit.
Jeez. And after I kind of leveled off the top, I started working on the legs again. I gave it a quick sand just to make sure my joints were all even. And I'm just using a router just to get rid of these sharp edges. This wood is soft pine, and leaving those sharp edges are giving you a chance of tear up later in the future. So in my experience, I found out it's better just to get rid of those sharp edges. I'm just using a roundover bit. It doesn't have to be a big one. I'm using a smaller one, and with these big chunky legs, you really don't notice it. So now that I got the joints all flush and they're looking good, I went ahead and just sanded this down with a 100 grit because it is a lot easier to sand it when they're pieces like this rather than when they're all put together. I'm gonna have to go higher on the sandpaper, but at least I got one of the grits out of the way.
We ain't done yet.
But we're all set to put this together. This is easy enough. I'm just gonna put some glue in all the nooks and crannies and then just slide it together and put a clamp on it. And if you got one, it doesn't hurt to throw a square in there to make sure everything's good. So we got the legs put together, but we need to add some support for this tabletop. That means we gotta grab some more pieces, and we're just gonna make a cross member joint thing. I don't know terminology. But we're just gonna add some support up top here, this way and this way. And this is just some thicker pallet wood pieces. I'm gonna cut it to size and mill it down. I'm gonna flip these legs upside down so I can get a flat joint up here, and just put these together with some pocket holes and glue. Okay, so it's the next morning. Ugh. Much better. And we got the table legs done. So next thing we're gonna do is rip down our tabletop. We're gonna rip it down to what our edges measure, which is what we planned at 38 inches. Wow, it actually turned out. But we're ripping it down to 38 inches on each side, and then plus our 1-inch trim that we're gonna put all the way around the table. That's gonna give us our 40 by 40 inches. So I'm lucky enough, I got a table saw where I could rip this down right on that. Actually, I just looked. My big ass table saw only goes to 36 inches. Convenient. So you can go ahead and just use your circular saw. If you got a track, that's awesome. Otherwise, just clamp down a piece of wood. So next thing we're gonna work on is installing this trim around the tabletop. We're gonna install it using some glue and some nails. Definitely make sure that you have it on a flat surface. That way when you flip it over, your top is gonna be all even and your joints are gonna be flush. You can obviously see that I need a little bit bigger of a work area. I'll put that on the things to do. So, we got our tabletop all put together, and I went ahead and sanded all the edges so that they're nice and flush. But we still got an issue. Because the wood I use is less than desirable, there are quite a bit of cracks in here.
You ugly. You mama say you ugly. Hey!
And while we can't stop the wood expanding and contrasting, we can at least stop these cracks from getting bigger. And we're gonna do that by putting in some bow tie. I do a layout of what I think looks appropriate, and then I just put some blue tape down on where I want them. Put that bow tie on the tape, and just use a knife to cut it out.
That's a knife.
Once we have it cut out, we can remove the inside, and that's gonna be the area we're gonna router out. We're gonna router out with just a straight bit. I'm just getting as close to that tape as I can. Once we get it routed out as best as we can go ahead and finish it off with a chisel. So after I sanded everywhere that I could while the pieces were separated, it was time to do my glue up. Since my tabletop was so thin, I couldn't really use screws to secure it from the bottom. So really my only option was just using wood glue. I used a healthy dose all over the legs and the cross beams, and then just clamped it down and let it sit overnight. And now that our table is put together, we can do our final coat of sanding. If only we could make this more enjoyable. I got an idea. So, sanding is the worst thing about woodworking, but it does give you a great opportunity to get some beers in. And that's the video, guys. I finished this project off with a red cherry stain. If you guys like this project as much as I did, go ahead and comment on how many beers you think I drank during this video. But until next time, grab a beer and build something.